Good evening, St. Thomas friends. It's lovely to be sharing with you this evensong. Our gospel this evening is from Luke's Gospel, chapter 5, verses 1 to 11. And it's the story of Jesus' calling of Peter and James and John, the sons of Zebedee. It's a beautiful story. The first 4 chapters of John are all, of Luke rather, are all setting the scene. The story of Mary, the Immaculate Conception, the genealogy of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount. And the opening verses of chapter 5 find Jesus sitting by the lake of Gennesaret, Galilee. And he's pressed in by the crowd, and so he gets into a boat and moves a little away from the shore and teaches the crowd. The boat happens to be the boat of Simon Peter. And as he tells the story, as the narrator tells the story, Jesus finishes teaching. And then he says to Simon Peter, go and take your boats and throw your nets over and go and catch some fish. And Peter is indignant. He says, we've been working all night and we never caught a single thing. And he doesn't see the need to follow Jesus, but he complies. And the fishermen capture such a large harvest of fish, a catch of fish, that the boats nearly fall over, and they have to send more boats to go and help. And Simon Peter's response to Jesus is to bow on his knees and say, Lord, away from me, I am a sinful man. And his response comes evidently not only from the miracle, but also through having been enthralled by Jesus' teaching, by sitting and listening to what he has to say. And there's something about the interaction that has happened that has just captured Peter, and not only him, but also James and John. And the verse ends, the section ends in verse 11, where Jesus says, from now on, you will be catching people. This is what the NRSV says, the New Revised Standard Version. And verse 11 then closes the scene with the disciples getting up and leaving everything to follow Jesus. It's an amazing story. But of course, it always brings back for me the phrase, from now on, you will be fishers of men. And I cannot, every time I come across a different translation of this, I struggle, because fishers of men has just got such a lovely ring to it. And from now on, you will be catching people, or from now on, you will be fishing for people, somehow doesn't capture the same. From now on, you will be fishers of men. And that made my mind go a little to ask, well, what is it about this? Why do I feel this about fishers of men? Why do I feel so benignly familiar and comfortable with it? And so I went to the Greek to see what the text said in the original, as it was written by Luke all those years ago. And what is very interesting is that the word to catch, from now on you will be catching people, it comes from the word zagrio, the Greek word zagrio. It's only used twice in the New Testament. In this context, where Jesus says you will be catching people, and another time where people are, in Paul's writings, made captive by the devil. The point and the reason for using this word is zagreo comes from 2 Greek words, zoos, which means alive, so you'll come across it in zoology or zoophilic. Zoo is the root word for being alive, or the name Zoe, which means a living tender shoot. And the Greek word agreo, which means to capture. So when put together, zagreo means to capture alive. So in other words, Jesus is saying, from now on, you will be capturing people. And the common way that this word could be used in Greek is to enthrall, to capture for life. And so Jesus is not necessarily saying that you will be catching people with hooks or bringing them into a cult, but rather he's saying from now on you will be enthralling people. In other words, what he was saying was that you will be doing what I did today, in the same way that you have been enthralled, you have been captured by the message that I bring to you, and by myself, by my person. You too will be enthralling others. But then the second, more interesting, is the word um, that is translated in the King James Version as man or men. From now on, you will be fishers of men. Actually, the Greek uses the word anthropos here. So it's zagreo anthropos. And anthropos is not a word for a man per se. There is another Greek word for a man. Anthropos is the word for a member of the human race. It explicitly includes woman, but I choose today to interpret this as a call, an inclusive call, which the translators of the Bible over the years have narrowed through the use of exclusive language. And it is that contrast between the Greek word anthropos, the intention behind the statement that Jesus made, the words of Jesus, from now on you will enthrall humankind, you will enthrall people, you will enthrall individuals, you will enthrall persons, as opposed to the words I inherited, you will be fishers of men. And that led me to reflect on inclusive language and what it means, and why inclusive language is such a helpful thing for us in this day and age, and more particularly when we think about Jesus' call. So inclusive language is a language, the use of language that is designed to be open and not to put others off by implying either intentionally or even completely unintentionally that you are not part of this group. And so the use of genderized terms when we are speaking about individuals who may be of any gender or any where on the gender spectrum, the biology of sex spectrum, to use words that are exclusive means to leave someone out, to require that someone has to do a mental translation in their head to say, do I belong in this group? And the wonderful thing is that Jesus' call was an inclusive call. He used the word anthropos when he could have used the word men. And this is particularly important because Jesus lived in a patriarchal society. So it would have been completely reasonable culturally for him to want to only call men. But he chose to include and incorporate all people. I wondered why I was so sensitive to this particular phrase. And as I reflect back on my own life, I know that my adulthood has seen for me an uncovering and an opening of those avenues and opportunities and ways of thinking about myself that were closed to me as a young woman growing up in the 1980s in South Africa. My parents were products of their time, but were fiercely patriarchal. My mother believed in the supremacy of men, that my father was the head of the household, even when my father didn't. And for example, we all went to very good schools, but somehow my brother's school was always better than mine. I recall my mom saying to have a daughter was one thing, but to have sons was just amazing. I also remember my parents saying that, I mustn't be a teacher because the teaching profession has lost status. Since women became teachers, it's lost status. And the same will happen for medicine, for health. And I, in my young impressionable years, took on board all these negative statements about who I was as a woman, as a person. And so it has been sheer joy to me to uncover particularly in the gospel, and particularly in the person of Jesus, an inclusive call that has reinstated for me some of my sense of who I am. I read such a beautiful introduction to a text on theology from a woman's perspective by someone called Dorothy Sayers. And she says over here, perhaps it is no wonder that women were first at the cradle and last at the cross. They had never known a man like this man, Jesus, and there has never been such another. A prophet and a teacher who never nagged them, never flattered or coaxed or patronized, who never made arch jokes about them and never treated them either as the woman, God help us, or the ladies, God bless them, who never rebuked them who rebuked them without querulousness and praised without condescension, who took their questions and arguments seriously, who never mapped out their sphere for them, who never urged them to be feminine or jeered at them for being female, who had no axe to grind and no uneasy male dignity to defend, who took them as he found them and was completely unself-conscious. There is no act, no sermon, no parable in the whole gospel that borrows its pungency from female perversity. Nobody could possibly guess from the words and deeds of Jesus that there was anything funny about woman's nature. We might easily deduce it from his contemporaries, however, and from his prophets before him, and from his church today, that women are not human, and nobody shall persuade us that they are human. Let them say what they like, we will not believe it, though one rose from the dead. These words by Dorothy Sayers really captured for me how Jesus' invitation, Jesus' enthralling of the people who sat and listened to him, was an open, inclusive invitation, and that he didn't only enthrall the men around him and the disciples whom he called, but he enthralled everyone. And for me, my adulthood has been in part a journey of uncovering this and rooting out my own prejudiced views towards myself, my own patriarchy and my own sexism towards myself, and therefore a flowering of my ability to be who I am with great joy and self-love. And however, as you listen, it may be that you have other isms that you need to root out of your own psyche. We are so injured as we grow up in many ways, in addition to the joys and love that we receive as humans, that we suffer from the effects of racism, of ageism, of discrimination towards ourselves because we're different in some way or another. And it may be that you have your own demons to root out. I want to leave you with this invitation that Jesus offers to us, an inclusive invitation to the anthropos, that we can be enthralled by him as the disciples were enthralled. The gift in this inclusive invitation is to bring others with us along this journey of giving and receiving love. And that is where our Psalm 116, is the most beautiful psalm today. It helps us as we understand what it means to live on this journey of uncovering our true selves as loved, welcomed, included persons in the kingdom of heaven. Psalm 116 in Nan Merrill's version says, "Receive my love, O beloved, you who hear my voice and my supplication. You incline your ear to me. I call upon you with trust both day and night. When the snares of fear encompass me and the pangs of loneliness envelop me, I suffer distress and anguish, and then I call upon you, my rock. You come to my aid. Your strength upholds me." And the psalm goes on to say, "What shall I give to you for all your goodness to me? I will drink the chalice of love and praise you who have done wondrous things. I will bear witness to you, O bread of life, in the presence of all the people. I will offer you the gift of gratitude and acknowledge your loving presence with joy. I will bear witness to you, O giver of life, in the presence of all the people. In the sacred altar of my heart, in your midst, O beloved, praise be to you." Amen.